Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to, part 2 of our special SMNTY Makes Cocktail Happy Hour. Because this is now Anney's turn to bring her creation to your ears. And I have to laugh because in making mine, Anney, do you realize how much you have used?
Yes.
And this is like, I was like, I need a tumbler. I don't have like a giant tumbler for this. So I had to cut it in half. I'm sorry.
No,
in order to keep up, because we are actually recording both of the happy hours from the previous one to this one back to back. So that means we're having 2 cocktails. Yes, it's that kind of day. And for myself, I'm like, I need to slow down just a little bit. So doing the full amount of the chosen cocktail would be too much. But before we get ahead of ourselves, can you tell us about this cocktail?
Yes. Well, okay. Perhaps first, drink responsibly if you choose to do so. Secondly, if you listened, so it's kind of odd, but Samantha does half of the happy hours. I do the other half. So even though there's an episode of mine in between, we're doing 2 of Samantha's back to back. But this was Samantha's idea that we would each turn in a cocktail and then have each other make it and try it. And I sent 3 ideas. I sent one that was essentially like a frozen watermelon gin lime situation, which is one of my favorite things. And if you've heard that past episode, it was kind of a play on what I used to drink in the summer, non-alcoholic, with my mom. That was just so refreshing. And I call that one the Flames of Mustafar. And then I came up with another one that I thought was just funny, and it's just coffee with a shot of tequila in it. And it's called Coffee One Kenobi, because right now on Archive of Our Own, the fan fiction website, it's a huge tag. I wish I'd written it down, but essentially like, if the Obi-Wan Kenobi show isn't Obi-Wan Kenobi just drinking tequila and crying, then I don't want to be there. So I thought that was funny. This one is called That's So Feetch. Which Feetch is a Ewokese curse word. So I like the sound of Feetch. I also thought it was funny with that so fetch. Anyway, it's a play on a paloma, because we were trying to make things that each other would like. And I know that you like grapefruit, and I know that you like jalapenos.
I do.
Interestingly, as I mentioned in the previous episode we did with Samantha's cocktail, there was a jalapeno simple syrup involved, and then I got rid of it because I never do that. And then she did it for her cocktail. So now I feel kind of silly. But it's very close to the Yub Nub cocktail, which I've described before. But it is a lot of alcohol. And in fact, I've made sure, because I did base this on a paloma. I guess a paloma is supposed to be equal parts alcohol and grapefruit juice. But essentially, it's 2 to 4 shots tequila, whichever way you're going, and 2 to 4 shots grapefruit to match it, and then 1 ounce lime juice, and then top it off with sparkling water, and then garnish with jalapenos. If you have the know-how, wherewithal to make jalapeno syrup, then put that in there. I added a little of the basil simple syrup from the last one, actually. Yeah, right. It's really nice. It's real nice.
So this is different from the Yub Nub because A, it doesn't have basil unless you added the basil simple syrup, and it doesn't use gin, and it doesn't use the black pepper. And I think the thing that's missing, because I had admitted earlier I had to cut all this in half, but also I needed a little sweetness, which would have been the simple syrup, but because you excluded that process, we don't have that sweetness in here. So I added agave, which we have on hand. And then I also in my shaker, I used the jalapenos to put into that to add that spicy because I love a good spicy kick. It's true.
Yeah.
Grapefruit is one of my favorites. Basil is one of my favorites. And jalapenos are my favorites. Like, I have a lot of favorites. But yeah, I like a good spice. Grapefruit is right up there. Our favorite drink, which is close to the Yub Nub, is something that's popular here in Atlanta called the In the Park, which is all of those things with the gin and the basil. And I love, 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 love that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very nice and tasty, very bright. I love the jalapeno addition to it.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah.
I would have absolutely done the jalapeno simple syrup with you. I get why you didn't. You were trying to make it simple, and I never make things simple. So it was kind of like the two personalities that came clashing together.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just funny because it's not that hard, as we discussed in the last one. But I was just like, I don't want to make Samantha do it. And then you were like, Anney, you have to make this. It's just our two different personalities shining through.
I'm like, this is easy. You can do this. Let's go.
And you were right. You were right.
But yeah, because I had made the pumpkin spice simple syrup type of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Before, and it was so easy that I was like, this is super easy. The only problem is because you create it, make it out of fresh ingredients, you have a small amount of time to use it. Yeah, so that is the difference in those.
Because that's one of the things I was worried about was I just didn't want it to go to waste. But you halved your recipe, right? And so I'm already almost through with it. Yeah, so that's perfect.
You're right. It's going to be like for one more drink and you're good.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have not discussed, and this might be one of those moments where we are getting deeper than anticipated.
Okay.
But I don't think it is. But I also know you well enough that sometimes it diverts very quickly. So we'll see. We'll see. But why do you think it's important? And why are you so into naming all of these Star Wars puns?
All right, Samantha, prepare for a 10-hour lecture.
Here we go.
I think I know there are some people who hate puns. And in our office is like a house divided with people who love puns and people who hate puns. And because of that, there was a article that circulated, it was many years ago. It was about why people like puns. And when I read it, I was like, yeah, I like the fun aspect of it. Like it makes me excited. I get excited about it. When I find one I like, I'm just more thrilled than is probably appropriate. But it's almost like a game. It's like a puzzle. It's like, ooh, I know there's something there. I can tie it into this. And then you're kind of interweaving your passion, in my case for Star Wars, with what you think the drink means and the ingredients in it. And it feels like a mind exercise for me. It feels like a puzzle, like I'm trying to solve a Rubik's Cube or something. And when I do it, it's just so thrilling. And there's like during my Dungeons and Dragons session where almost all of it is just Star Wars puns, I get a big thrill out of like the kind of groaning, begrudging smiles I get out of people when they're like, oh, Snow-Obi-Wan Kenobi, huh? Like, I don't know. I just really like it. It's silly, but it's rewarding to me, I guess.
And one of the things we talked about for these episodes is it's not research. We don't do too much research. We just want to sit back and talk. It is kind of something that we do selfishly because we want to take a break from the deep dives. And I think we've talked about how long it takes us to go through a researched episode and doing it well and trying to get it done appropriately and as unbiased to a certain extent of an ideal of it. And it takes a lot out when we go into deep, dark episodes. And so we decided for things like happy hour, we just want to let it be. And sometimes it takes us in a therapeutic level. Sometimes it's just very vapid and silly. And we love that. But, you know, one of the things I would say about puns in general, I don't do puns well. I can't grasp it. I am fairly literal when it comes to things like that. I'm like, this is silly. What are you doing? But I also think it's partially because I can't. Like, I really just can't get into it because I don't have that wit. When it comes to sarcasm or playing off of people's comments or reading people, I can do that all day. When it comes to puns, it's a whole different level of wit that I can't hit. And I really think it takes a lot deeper level of intelligence to get to this point. Intelligence and imagination. So, and again, this may have everything to do with my own, like in my trauma, I had to grow up. In your trauma, you were able to recede into fantasy, which we talked about a lot. And that might have something to do with it. I don't know. This is all conjecture. This is all an opinion of my own. But from what I can gather, people who do puns well are highly imaginative, highly intelligent, and are quick on their feet when it comes to these conversations, which I do find funny because you also laugh at your own jokes a lot.
I do, yeah.
And that's amazing. That's amazing to be able to do that. I find it funny because as we were talking about the episode preceding this one, part 1, about like, okay, can you make this a pun without it being Star Wars? You're like, I refuse, and not at all. And I find it funny because it's more of me teasing you than anything else. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of that level of like, I'm not into Star Wars. I can't think of puns. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to make it an allegory of something rather than a pun.
Mm-hmm.
Or a metaphor of some sort instead of a pun. And I really thought that was interesting because you do find joy. There are a lot of people who find joy, but there are also people like, this is the lowest point of humor. Why would you do this? And I'm like, but can you do it? I don't think you can. I can't.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly varying degrees of good puns and bad puns. And I think there's a place for all of them. I do, when I love something, it's hard for me not to love it everywhere. So like Star Wars puns, Star Wars food, Star Wars, like it's hard for me not to do that. And I think it feels, yeah, you're right. We're going to go deep. It feels kind of like a really innocent thing for me. It feels like such a nice time where I can just innocently laugh at something that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And find such joy out of something that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know it and I enjoy it. Like it's a fun, over on Savor, every episode we do is pretty much a pun. And I send my host over there, I send her 15 to 30 puns for her to go through and decide which one she thinks is good, because probably half of them are very specific to only me and no one else will get it. But I'll sit there and I'll be laughing on a work day, just like, this pun about bread. Oh, right. I'm on fire today. And I know, I don't know. It just feels like a very light moment. And as you said, our jobs can be, very, very grateful for them, obviously, but they can be hard to talk about a lot of the stuff we talk about. And so it's sort of like a nice space that I've carved out where I get to have this sort of innocent joy.
Right.
But also, I'm just a big nerd. I like giving names to things. I like making things into a bigger deal than they have any right to be. I like that.
And I think that's okay. Like this is a whole level of like, when it comes to you and I, our reactions are very different because as you like to name things, I do not. Even growing up, I realized how odd I was because I never really gave names to my stuffed animals. To the point that I was so on the nose that I had, sad story, you ready? When I was in the orphanage, preparing to come to the US after being adopted, my now adoptive parents sent me a care package that included a very generic yellow bear. The only toy I've ever had. So I've never grown up with toys. It was always told to me that I could not receive them. It was something that I had to earn and I was not good enough to earn. Like I was physically told that. Literally, they would show it to me, put it away, and then it would be discarded. So this was the first time I had something that was mine and it was youthful. So this was age 6. I was getting this. Before I left, it was stolen. And it was stolen because no one in that kind of space, none of the kids got things. So obviously someone wanted it, and it made sense and I didn't push through. It made me sad, sentimental wise, but it was what it was. Came to the US, had a little like baby shower-ish, I guess, adoption shower, I don't know. Shower where I received gifts, and I got a duplicate that was blue. So the original version was yellow. Long story now that I've made this. But because I was so excited and it became my favorite toy, I still have it to this day. I did not name it for years and realized how odd that was in comparison to all the other children, that I was like, oh, I have to name it. What do I name it? And I named it Blooper because it was blue, and it's spelled Blueper. Like, that's how original I am. But I could not find the significance to do so. And the childlike love of something, I kept it because it was sentimental. It wasn't because, you know what I mean? There was no passion towards it. I still have it, like I said, and it is sentimental. But if it disappeared, I'm not sure if I would be sad. But all of that to say is like the reaction between you and I are so different that I love seeing that. Also makes me think that I'm the abnormal one in this scenario, but I do wish I could have formed those attachments. And I think it's very healthy that you can find that joy. And a majority of the people we know in our office love this because the inside jokes that happen in our office are typically around puns.
It's a thing to behold, everyone. It is a thing to behold. Recently, we've, as we mentioned, we had to move offices, and that involved a lot of moving of things into my apartment. And as we've said, I'm a very sentimental person. And so I just have so much stuff, and I had to go through it. And I don't know. I find it interesting that it's like you and I had the opposite, where I was like, I have to hold on to every shred of everything. And you were like, it could go away at any minute. I will never get it. Yeah.
Yeah. There are some things that I'm like, oh, and I'm sad by it because I love it because I like the design of it, or I like the aesthetic of it. But sentimentality is like, I know I should feel this way. So this is kind of where the reactive attachment of like not really knowing, but kind of knowing. And I'm trying to figure that part out. Like, okay, this is what's considered normal. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I should lean into that. I've talked about collections and such before, and having to pretend like that I had deep hobbies like this. Yeah. But, you know, that's again, a different conversation in itself. Again, I knew we were going to go a little deep on this, even though it was a simple question. Simple, silly question. Because there's a lot of depth to our humors and our loves and our passions. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And also, like, bringing it to craft. So you will always remember these names. I will always forget them, and you have to remind me because I have no attachment to it. That's kind of the other part of that, because same thing when we do our little Star Wars cocktail time. Yeah. I do remember the Tatooine sunset, but then like that's it. That's almost it.
Yeah, and I mean, you said abnormal and all this stuff throughout. I don't think I have a lot of friends who are similar to you, where they find it strange that I've like saved every card I've ever received.
I don't think it's strange. I feel like that's what I know more of. My family are very sentimental in the same way. So that's why I'm like, in this one, I'm the odd one out.
I mean, I think there are gradations, and I think you and I we have very different reactions. But I know plenty of people, you are not in my circle abnormal, and I would never say somebody is abnormal for that. I think, like, for me, trauma, like, fiction has been so much of what's gotten me through trauma. So, like, when I think of Tatooine Sunset, I'm remembering of, oh God, every time I see that scene, I feel so good and everything else doesn't matter. And it just feels, so I think that I have like an emotional with every name. Yeah. So that makes sense to me, that I would have that and you wouldn't have that.
Yeah. It's a lot to think on based on pun named alcoholic beverages.
I think we're going to have I think we're going to have a revisit, and I'm going to go over my worst Star Wars puns I've ever made. And I think it's going to be great.
I think we should. That might just be shots, though, to be honest.
That's a very special episode. I would love to do it because I have them all written down for this Dungeons and Dragons things. I just have a document where I make bad puns.
You sent me some before. You're like, look at this. And I was like, oh my God.
You're like,
here we go.
Please stop.
Here we go. No, it wasn't please stop. Like, here we go. Bracing myself.
I sent you some of you have sent me the messages, but Mark Hamill's autographs recently went viral. Things he thought no one would ever see. And I was like, look, see? I'm already working in this wheelhouse. So I feel like I got my creativity is just beginning.
Destiny.
I think a lot of people would argue puns are the dark side, but I would disagree. Well, yeah, this really went places. Who knew? But cheers to you, Samantha.
Cheers.
And cheers to you, listeners. If you want any of these recipes, just email us and we'll send them to you. They're pretty simple, but just let us know. And if you have any recipes you want to share with us, because as we mentioned, we would love like a official SMNTY cocktail. You can email us. Our email is stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter @momstuffpodcast or on Instagram @stuffmomnevertoldyou. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.